So, if you've ever spent some time in the book of Genesis, you definitely know the story of Jacob and Esau. I mean, it's probably one of the most famous sibling rivalries in all of history, just packed with drama, deception, and, destiny.
You've got Jacob on one side, kind of the quiet homebody who tricks his own blind father to steal the family blessing. And then there's Esau, the rugged outdoorsy hunter who sells his entire inheritance for, what, a bowl of soup? Their story is just this roller coaster of family drama that keeps building and building.
So after years apart, the brothers finally have this big reconciliation. Jacob's about to settle down in the promised land, and we're all ready for the next big chapter in the story of the chosen family. But then, the Bible does something really weird. The whole story just comes to a screeching halt.
We slam right into Genesis chapter 36, and this entire chapter feels like a huge, unnecessary detour. It's basically a long, and let's be honest, kind of boring and confusing list of names. And it's all about Esau, the brother who lost out.
And this is the exact question that makes most of us just flip right past the chapter. I mean, why would you pause the main story to give us this super detailed genealogy of the son who wasn't chosen? It feels like a mistake, right? Just a weird interruption. But what if it's not? What if this detour is actually one of the most important parts of the entire story?
Okay, so here's our first clue that this isn't just some random list of names. It turns out this kind of thing has happened before. It's actually a really clever literary pattern that gets used all throughout the book of Genesis.
And the key to unlocking this whole thing is a Hebrew word, toledot. It basically means generations or records, and it works kind of like a formal chapter heading. Every time you see this word in Genesis, it's a signal that a whole new section is starting, usually focused on one particular family line.
And the author of Genesis uses these toledot sections in a very specific rhythm. There's a clear, repeating pattern. First, the story wraps up what's happening with the father. Then, it gives the complete family tree of the son who was not chosen to carry on the covenant. And only after that branch of the family tree is all tied up does the story turn its full attention to the chosen son.
For example, we saw this exact same thing happen earlier. Right after Abraham's story ends, we get the entire genealogy of his son Ishmael. And then the main story picks up with Isaac, the chosen son. And now here we are again seeing the exact same pattern. The book is giving us Esau's complete family tree to formally close his storyline before it dives deep into the generations of Jacob. It's a very deliberate, tidy way of saying, okay, that story is complete, now let's focus over here.
So the placement of the chapter is totally intentional. But that still doesn't explain why the content is so strange. And this is where it gets really interesting. Because when you look closely at the names in the list, a second, much more dramatic clue pops up. There is a scandal hiding in plain sight.
Yeah, if you're a really careful reader, you might notice something's a little off. The names of Esau's wives that are listed here in Genesis 36, they're different from the names we were given for them back in Genesis 26. So, is this just a sloppy mistake, a contradiction? Or is something else going on?
Let's take a look at wife number 1. In the earlier story, her name is Bashemeth, which means perfumed. A perfectly nice name. But here, in chapter 36, she's called Ada, which means ornament or jewelry.
Now, a lot of scholars think these are intentional name changes, like nicknames that reveal their true character. The shift from a pleasant name like perfumed to ornament suggests she became known for adorning herself, not just for beauty, but maybe for pagan rituals, idolatry. And this perfectly explains why the Bible said earlier that these wives were a source of grief to Isaac and Rebekah.
But the change for the second wife is even more of a shocker. At first, she's introduced as Judith, which means praiseworthy. But in this chapter, her name is Oholibama, and that name translates to tent of the high place.
And tent of the high place is not subtle at all. Back then, high places were notorious as sites for Canaanite idol worship. So her new name isn't just a nickname, it's a label. It's basically branding her as someone so caught up in pagan rituals that her identity is tied to the very tent of idol worship. These name changes are like a hidden commentary, showing us the deeply pagan world Esau chose for his family.
Okay, so we've got a deliberate literary structure, and we've got these scandalous hidden details. When you put those two clues together, the true purpose of Genesis 36 just snaps into focus. This isn't just a boring list. It's a really powerful statement comparing the legacies of these two brothers.
Think about it. If you were just going to measure success by the world's standards at this point in the story, who would you say is winning? I mean, the contrast couldn't be more stark. Esau has a whole kingdom in Mount Seir. Jacob has one little plot of land for a tomb. Esau has huge property and livestock. Jacob is basically a wanderer. Esau is the father of dukes and kings. Jacob has zero political power.
Genesis 36 goes way out of its way to list all of Esau's accomplishments. It details his massive household, his property, his livestock. It calls his sons chiefs, which is a term for powerful military and political leaders. And then, most telling of all, it points out that a long line of kings ruled in Esau's land before any king reigned over the Israelites. I mean, by every single worldly metric, Esau was a massive success story.
And that right there is the entire point of the chapter. It's setting up this dramatic contrast, not just between two brothers, but between two totally different definitions of what it means to be successful.
See, Esau spent his whole life chasing worldly success. He wanted power, he wanted property, he wanted a political dynasty, and as Genesis 36 makes crystal clear, he got everything he wanted. Jacob, on the other hand, for all his flaws, he chased one thing his entire life: that covenant blessing from God. He wrestled for it, he deceived for it, he struggled for it, but his eyes were always fixed on that spiritual inheritance.
You could really sum it all up like this. Both brothers got exactly what they were chasing. Esau looked for material wealth, and he found it. Jacob looked for God's blessing, and he found it.
So now we can finally see that Genesis 36 is anything but a boring list. It's this carefully crafted, really profound reflection on what makes a life good or successful. It shows us two different paths: the path of worldly achievement and the path of spiritual inheritance.
This chapter really is the final word on Esau. It shows us the absolute best that a life focused only on the material world can get you: wealth, power, even kings. And then it just says goodbye to him. His part of the story is over. From here on out, the narrative turns exclusively to Jacob, the guy who chose the blessing over the birthright and whose legacy would literally change the world.
And that, of course, leaves us with a pretty provocative question, doesn't it? It turns this ancient story right back around on us. This chapter forces us to ask, what are we chasing? By what standard are we measuring our own lives? By Esau's standard of worldly achievement, or by Jacob's standard of seeking a blessing that the world can't possibly give?